Okay, so what we're gonna do here is you're gonna go to pr.transactiondesk.com, and then it's gonna show you a page like this. Then you're gonna click this button over here that says create transaction. For this one, I'm just gonna do testing, and then under here you can eventually save some templates. So then your templates will then show in here, and then all your forms will be saved. Um, but for this one, I'm just going to show you how to do it from scratch. And then also, if you wanted, like for a specific property, for it to input a lot of the data for you, you can MLS connect it, and then you just copy and paste the MLS number right here. But again, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank for now. And then, so if you were to MLS connect it, this is where all this information would be filled in for you. Personally, I don't fill this in one by one by one. There's a lot of the stuff that you can leave blank, and you don't really need right away. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you kind of what forms you need, and this is all how to write a new contract for a buyer. Um, but then on this page, what's really important here is this is going to be your whole transactional file. So you're going to want to add or create new transaction contacts for your clients here. So this is when you do the type, right? If they're the buyer on this one, you do their name, and then you'd put in their email, right? And then any of this stuff, if they have like a different legal name or different preferred signature or anything like that, you could add it in here. If you don't add any of this, these aren't required. Obviously, you just need their email address, but it's just going to sign for them as first name, last name. So for the sake of this, this is where everything will save. And this makes your life a lot easier. You'll see later. But on the last step where we go to send out the paperwork, it's going to help you auto-populate all the initial boxes and everything that you need for the buyer to sign. So, and this is your forms page. So this is step 4 of 5 here. For buyer representation from just like a basic standpoint, you're going to need the purchase contract. I'm going to just type in purchase contract, and it's going to be residential purchase contract. This one's updated in February of 2020. I'll make sure that one, I don't think it'll even give you old, outdated ones, but this is just showing you there. You're going to need an agency form for the buyer. You just go ahead and type in agency, select buyer, um, and then you can go, and then you're going to need the market conditions advisory. If there's an HOA, you're going to need the HOA addendum. And with the buyer, right now, so if you need the additional clause addendum, and then I think that's it. And then you're going to need the pre-qualification form, which you're going to add in later, because typically that form is going to come to you from the lender, or you can add it in. But this is just adding in their blank forms that they'll have for you. So then you go ahead and see how it says 4 here. So now I've got 4 items in there. So now I've got everything I need in order to send this offer out. And the one you may not need is going to be this additional clause addendum, but I will run you through that in just a minute. But then on the residential purchase contract, here's what it looks like. And then you can go through here. You can leave these checkboxes blank for right now. Your client can go ahead and check them or initial next to them, but this is just kind of letting them know what they're entering into as far as this contract goes. Right. So if you MLS connected it, this is all going to be filled out for you. You'll fill in your buyer's name, but if you filled out your contact information appropriately, it'll show your buyer's name for you. But the seller's name will auto-populate from the tax records if you MLS connected it. Same with all the address, city, legal description, all this. But if you are going through this manually, all this stuff's pretty straightforward. But then you go to mymonsoon.com, and then you would just type in property address, right? And then this area right here, this is where you'll find the legal description, the full seller's name, right? And then you'll find the what else do we need from in here? Yeah, I think just those. But if you were gonna like go through one by one and fill it in, here's the proper address, the zip, the subdivision, all this good stuff like the assessor's parcel number. But if you were to correctly connect it with the MLS, all that stuff's going to be put in here for you. And then here, so like just for simple numbers sake, right? So if they were to offer 100K for the property, they were going to put 20 grand down. This is how you fill this out. Or I'm sorry, this is earnest money. I'd typically do 1 to 2%. If the purchase price was really this low, I'd be doing 2%, so $2,000. And then if they were doing down payment, you write that in here, down payment, and then you would put in the total down here. And then you just do whatever is left over here, you're just going to put in as the remaining, like a new loan for whatever type of loan it is. I always just add this in here, new conventional loan for 30 years. And that's up to you. And then from here, earnest money is in the form of, you can let the buyer select this, but typically I'm just going to do wire transfer. This is the easiest way for us to typically set this up. We just give the buyer instructions to go to their bank and then do the wire transfer. Alternatively, a lot of title companies will send a courier to you to do a personal check pickup. So where, like, if we're using Chicago Title, for example, and your client just has a check for $2,000, we can send a car to come pick up the check from them at work or wherever, and then they can just open up escrow that way. This way is normally the easiest. This one's normally the fastest, but there are other ways to do it if your client needs to do it another way. And then I always select escrow company, close of escrow, right? Whatever the close of escrow is going to be, 30 days, 45 days, whatever. And then here, so this is where I added that form additional clause addendum. You're only going to need that if the event is like you're waiving something out of this contract. For example, like if you're doing an all cash sale, or you're doing like, so you're waiving out the financing contingencies, or if you're waiving out anything with the inspection, you're doing an as is sale, or you're really, what this is form is for in the most common case right now is if you're waiving out the appraisal contingency. So if you're adding that, you would just need to select this box. But if there's an HOA, you select the HOA. If it's on a well, right? If it's like kind of out on the outskirts of town and it's not on city water, you'd want to make sure the well is selected and that form is also added. If it was built before 1978, you want to make sure the lead-based paint disclosure is in here. This is for if it's on a septic system, seller financing, short sale paperwork, if there is solar lease. That's very, very common on these properties that have solar on them, so make sure you're looking into that for the client too. But normally, this is going to be the main one that gets checked in this section. And then, of course, lead-based paint if it's pre-1978. And then this is the section where you select if you want the fridge, washer, and dryer for the client. And then here's the financing section. There's nothing here you need to fill out. This is all just helpful information for your client and understanding what they're doing. And then if this one, for example, we did a conventional, if it's going to be a cash, you'd select here and write in cash. And if the buyer is looking for seller concessions, this is where you add it in, right? So if they're looking for a 2% seller concession, this is where you'll add this in. If they're looking for just, a $2,000 credit for repairs up front, or for maybe not for repairs, but if they're just looking to pay off part of their loan costs, or this is just a portion of your offer, this is where you add it in here. That's where you'll add it in with your offer. Otherwise, if you're doing credits or anything down the road, they can always be added as with an addendum. Traditionally, the buyer pays for the appraisal. Of course, you can request that the seller pays for it. Traditionally, this is how I'll fill it out, buyer, and this will not be applied against seller concessions at close of escrow if it's applicable. And this is where I'll fill out all the title information, Chicago Title. This is who I like to always use. Here's all their information. And then you're going to keep going down here. And keep in mind the buyer can select their title company. This is who I'd recommend to them that we use. Buyer can always select somebody else, or the seller can have preference on title. This is just typically how I'll standardly fill this out. And then disclosure section. So if this was filled, if the lead-based paint information was provided prior to the contract acceptance, you just check this box here. That means it was already given to you in the MLS, so the agent had already sent it over. And this is only to be filled out. One of these is to check if it was built before 1978. That's where it says it here, if premises were built prior to 1978. So sellers shall provide this info if it wasn't already filled out for you. And then, so here, I'll show you later, but it's going to auto-populate. So this is saying if premises were constructed prior to 1978, you initial here, 1978 or later, initial here. And then here's your due diligence period. You can always just write in no additional warranties if you want to there. And then, but this is where you'll change it. So if you wanted to decrease or increase your inspection period, days, you can leave this blank if you want it a standard at 10 days. But say, for example, you want 14 for some reason, and that's what you've negotiated, or say you want 0 or 5 or whatever, that's where you'd put it in here. And then, as far as filling this out, this is where you'd check if the property's on a sewer, septic system, or alternative system. All this information is in the MLS, so just make sure you're finding it there. And then all this will be auto-populated too for the buyer to initial. And then as far as filling this out, I leave these blank because I like the standard amount of dates in here. But if you ever wanted to change any of them, this allows you to change them. But majority of the time when we get offers or sending offers, we'll intentionally leave these boxes blank because it does specify the number of days already for you, 3 days and 5 days. And then right here, so if your buyer wants a home warranty plan, you can say a home warranty plan will be ordered by the buyer, or if you wanted to for the seller to order it for some reason. But most of the time the buyer orders it, and up front I let the buyer select from a multiple different home warranty companies. I don't have one specifically I always recommend, or just auto fill out for them. So I just put to be disclosed later. And then I'll just put in the dollar amount. So if you want a $500 credit for it, put it in here. If you want a $700 credit for one on the larger house with the pool or appliances, you can put that in here. And then this just specifies who pays for it, buyer or seller or split. Or if you don't want one at all, you just check 296 here. And then this just goes through here. If you wanted to add in any additional terms or conditions, this is where you would do so. But pretty standard to leave that page blank for basic use here. And then here, this is your terms of acceptance. So you need to fill this out, do whatever you think is right. Typically, I give people about 24 hours from when I think I'll be able to actually get the offer over to them, but just discuss that with the other agent. Sometimes they need a week to respond and you don't want your offer to expire. Other times you want to give them 5 hours to respond, just depending case by case basis. But you just click this little calendar here, give them till tomorrow at 11 a.m. Right, and then also if you MLS added or connected the MLS to this, all this stuff will be outfilled here for you appropriately. But the agent MLS code, you want to make sure Austin's information is here below you. So it will not add him in unless you have this template saved for you. But there's his info. And then it also, just a quick way to find this stuff is to go into the MLS and then just type in Austin's name here. This is just how I'll always do it. And then you just click his name. This is going to show you, and this is also an easy way to find our office address. But again, you can set up templates where it'll automatically have all this stuff in there for you. but I don't have his license number memorized, so I'll just come in here and do it this way if it's not already saved for me, right? And then you want to make sure all our brokerage information is put in correctly when you do save your when you do save your templates, so it's always in there for you. But then kind of just going back here, I want to make sure box 450 is checked to confirm you're the buyer's agent. You're not representing the seller or both parties. And then all your client's information will be put in here. Typically, I don't give the buyer's address, city, state, and zip code with it. It's not required by our broker. You can put it in there if you want. And then also, if you correctly did an MLS Connect with the MLS to transaction desk, all the seller's agent's information is going to be in here as well. So that'll save you a ton of time. And then you want to make sure 464 is checked, and then that's the end of this offer, right? You come up here to this little folder, and then you're going to click save, and then now you can just go back to your previous page. And then just wanted to go through a couple more things. The rest of the forms are pretty simple. Agency disclosure for me, you want to make sure, obviously eXp Realty is up here. And then like for me, like if you have your PLLC set up, this is where you want to disclose that that's your PLLC they're doing business with, and your name. But if you don't have that, no big deal. Just put your name. And then you're going to do, for the buyer, you're going to check boxes 34 and 36, and then 45 as buyer. And then you can go ahead and save this one. And then you're just going to go back here. And then the HOA addendum, a lot of the time this is saved on the MLS previously for you. If not, and you don't know this information yet, you can just leave this out. But also, if this has already been filled out in the MLS, it'll show up in the documents for you on the next page already. But I'll just leave that one out. And then the additional clause addendum, there's how to like properly. So say for this property, we were going to waive our appraisal contingency, or see how this form can be used for multiple different things. If you're waiving anything out of the contract, or if you're doing non-refundable earnest, make sure this is filled out, because this gives very specific instruction as to what's going to happen to the buyer or to the seller, or what the expectation is for your client. Like if you just tell your client, I think we should waive the appraisal, and you write in waive appraisal on page 8 on the other contract, it doesn't give clear and concise direction as far as what's going to happen if the property fails to appraise, and what's going to happen to the earnest money if there is a dispute. So you want to make sure this stuff's filled out, right? So if you're just waiving the appraisal directly, read through this, but buyer agrees to waive the appraisal contingency pursuant to the financing section of the contract. In the event that it fails to appraise for at least the sales price, buyer agrees that the buyer's down payment shall be increased in the amount equal to the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. So meaning, for example, in this contract, if we're at $100,000 in price, and the property appraises for $80,000 in price, they are going to need to increase their down payment theoretically by $20,000 and cover that gap. If they don't want to do that, yes, they can cancel the contract, but if they are canceling the contract, they are in breach and they will be losing their earnest money. So, and then this one, if your client's all cash and they still want an appraisal done, like this is where you can fill that out. If there's an appraisal shortfall, so this is saying like if the property doesn't appraise for at least 90, this gives more direction on where that'll head. Typically, I don't fill this one out, but if the client's waiving waiver of appraisal, here it is. If you want to do appraisal shortfall, there it is. Right, survey, tax deferred exchange, water, but typically right now, for the sake of this video, this is typically why you'll need this form, or if you're doing a cash sale or non-refundable earnest money, that's where it'll be needed. And then again, you just go save. And then now what this will do is you can go to the next page, in this documents section, this is where you can like add a pre-qual from your downloads or whatever. You can drag and drop your pre-qualification form into here so you can send it for them to sign off all in one. Or if there's in the documents on the MLS, if there was the HOA paperwork already filled out or property disclosures, you'd see it right here. You can go ahead and click done there. And then now, as far as sending it to sign, you're going to go to forms. And then I do it this way. Check the box for purchase contract, agency, market conditions, and like if we were doing the additional clause addendum, you go to this basket and then you just click this signing and then send a new AuthentiSign for right now. This part normally takes just a minute because it's loading all these forms up into another file. And then if you added your contact, remember from that contact page earlier, you just go ahead and select add from transaction. So like for this one, see how this test buyer is in here. So that's because we added that to that contract tab, which was like step 3 before. We go ahead and press select. And this is why this is really important because you're going to go ahead and press map signers. And then test is going to be the buyer number 1. And then this is going to make sure you don't have to drag and drop every little signature block throughout this whole entire thing. These aren't required. So again, if you want your clients to check these boxes or if you want to add their initials to these, go ahead, but you're going to need to drag and drop. So you'd go into tools and you'd drag and drop each checkbox if you wanted the client to go ahead and check these. Again, it's not required by our broker, but you can go ahead and do that if you really, really want to. And then, or if you want them to initial everywhere, that's how you do that. But then here you'll see it's already populated for me down here. It's already populated there, there. I just like to double check it. But this section, this is the one you'll need to delete. So again, if it was built before 1978, this is where you need them to sign. If it was built after 1978, this is where you need them to sign. So if this one's after 1978, we would go ahead and delete this top box, right? Just like that. And then all these auto-populate really nicely for us, so we don't need to worry about those. If you, yep, and then it's looking good. This one's auto-populated. And then if you missed a checkbox or something, and you wanted to add it without going back, then there, before you send it to the client, right? Like if you add this checkbox here and you forgot it, that's fine, but just know your client's going to have to check that box now. Another way to do it is like if you want to just add a text box so they don't have to, then you can just put an X in there and then you just resize this. And then you can drag it that way if you wanted to. And then here, see this one didn't auto-populate. This is why we want to double check it. So you're going to need your client to sign there. If you wanted to auto-date for them, then you just drag that to correct that. Again here, this one's pretty annoying when it auto-populates because obviously they do not need to sign all this stuff. If we're just waiving the appraisal, that's the only signature we want on here. But if you just click and delete these, right, this is why you'll need to do that. But I think you guys get the point on that. And then, yeah, once you're ready to go, this one doesn't have an email address, so it's going to give me an error. But once you do this, this is going to send you to another page, and then you just go ahead and click send. And you can customize the way the email comes through if you want. But typically, I just text my client to let them know that this transaction desk will be sending them an email. And then that's all you'll need to know how to do.